is now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to the August edition of Learning Now TV. Despite the fact it's summer, we've got another packed programme for you. Nigel, what's on?
It's amazing. I guess all months are the same still really at the moment. This is August, but it's by no means sleepy August. It's wide awake and going for it August. So we've got a lot on this month. And Martin Cousins and I talk about the new CIPD report, Learning and Skills at Work. We'll dissect that before your very eyes. And part two of the Michel Paris-Slater discussion with Stacey Lloyd from the Royal Voluntary Service. And finally, a great book launch. Lauren Weinstein and Kathy Wasserman have launched a book called The Empowered Job Search, but it isn't just any other job search book. It's actually rooted in psychology. So it's the psychology of getting a job. So they take each stage of the job search process as a mindset that you've got to acquire. So looking for jobs needs a different mindset from being interviewed, from accepting a role, from starting a job. I think they've done an absolutely great job, and I've never read anything like it. So I'm very, very pleased to launch that.
Well, I'm looking forward to that one. I mean, I think against the backdrop of the Great Resignation and, you know, the return of the war for talent, that couldn't be more timely, could it? So I haven't read that yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Enjoy the show.
We're back to CIPD today in our latest research report. Martin's picked the Learning and Skills at Work Survey 2021 by CIPD. What's interesting? What did you learn reading this report, Martin?
Well, it's a survey of 1,200 L&D and HR professionals, and it's a kind of state of the nation. You know, where is everyone at with learning as a result of COVID? The survey went out in February this year, so it basically looks at the COVID experience, and I think it's quite interesting for, you know, what's changed and what hasn't. And I think it's one of those reports that suggests that there has been some change because there had to be, but there's been a lot of stuff that isn't changing very rapidly, and that might just be the story of learning. However, let's have a quick look at the headlines are this. You know, in terms of budget, mostly stayed the same, reduced for 31% of organisations. Size of L&D team, 50% stayed the same, 32% decreased. So that's, you know, some extra strain there. Use of external suppliers, 53% stayed the same, 31% decreased. Use of internal subject matter experts, 64% stayed the same, 11% decreased, 25% increased. So basically, there are some stresses on learning teams as a result of the last 12 months. I don't think anyone would be overly surprised by that. I think I get quite interested in what people say the challenges are over the coming months. And the business priorities are these, top three. There's a long list of them. And this is a 52-page report. So we can't go into everything right now because we'd be here for an awfully long time. So I'm just going to sort of take a slightly editorial view of it and just pull out a few things.
Give us the Cousins insights.
Well, I thought the challenges are, top three are business challenges, are address the challenges and opportunities of COVID, achieve growth targets, reduce costs. They're the top three business priorities. Top three people priorities are address the challenges and opportunities of COVID, improve workforce flexibility and agility, and improve employee motivation and behaviour. So whether those people priorities actually lead to the outcomes of those top three business priorities or not, I'm not sure, and whether there's alignment there. But I thought the interesting thing was skills. I thought actually it seems that people are talking about skills a lot.
Yeah, you'd think that would be right at the top of both agendas, wouldn't you? But it's not. Skills are sixth on the organisational priorities, something like that, aren't they?
Yeah, they're eighth on the organisational priorities.
Eighth, yes,
and there are various skills-related priorities for the L&D priorities, and they start at about number 6 and go down to number 12. So, really, I just thought it was quite interesting that skills aren't the burning issue right now for many organisations.
Yes. In spite of what we're told, in spite of what screams at us about massive skill realignments needed, it's not the priority. Some
research says that is, it is the top priority. This research doesn't say that. It's on the priority list, though. It's not like it's not a priority. No. Excuse me. So that was interesting. I thought the other thing, and I don't know what viewers would make of this. I think obviously there's been a massive increase, 7% increase of digital learning solutions. And the most used one, most popular one, is virtual classrooms. And I always wonder what that says about learning and development. Is there a connection between what used to be a preference for classroom delivery? So therefore, there's quite a easy segue into virtual classroom delivery. I know they're slightly different, but actually they're similar. And I do wonder about that. I wonder whether, that digital for learning and that acceleration of digital is basically kind of small steps into the familiar rather than anything transformational, because there's a lot of talk about transformation and automation and some significant shift in digital for learning, but actually it doesn't look like that is the case right now. So I think that some of VR and AR, they're being, they're on the up. But I just thought it was worth noting that maybe virtual classrooms being the most popular form of digital kind of delivery, for want of a better term, suggests that COVID has led people just to get into doing the thing that they know they can do that would solve the problem quickly. And I wonder whether what we're going to see over the coming months is going to be, a real deeper look at what transformation for learning looks like in the coming months. I don't know, but that was an interpretation for me.
It does seem like it's a massive lurch to the centre. That there is some interest in, for example, AR and VR, but there's a lot where it's not really moving forward. But if you look at webinars or virtual classrooms, there's a massive increase in interest and activity. But all of these things, like the difference between digital webinar, a digital e-learning or online course, blended learning, or AR or VR, I would think it should be increasingly hard to separate all those things. They should all be part of the mix that is available to any L&D person. But the fact that they are put in those distinct categories doesn't strike me as being an honest reflection of actually what's going on. I may be wrong. It's just convenient to have the categories, and people have obviously ticked the boxes in those categories. But the actual nature of learning in organisations seems to have become more complex over the pandemic, not less complex, as would appear to be indicated from the graph. What do you think, Martin?
Yeah,
am I wrong?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'll come back to the fact it's quite a big report, so there's lots in it, and I think we have to be quite careful about interpretation. So I think there has been an increase in some of the newer technologies, and the report does reflect that. There's one graph, it just says over the last 2 to 3 years, has your use of these types of learning and development increased, decreased, or stay the same? And AR, VR, 45% say it's increased. So, it's happening. So I think, we need to be mindful of that. It's like, this is I think there are some interesting developments in terms of the newer technologies. But at the moment, COVID has, I think, led learning teams to do things like virtual classroom because they already had the platforms that could do it, and it was easier. It's not as easy. If you've got nothing to do with VR, you're not going to suddenly turn to VR to start solving all your problems, because you literally had to start working from home and doing digital overnight. So I think virtual classrooms basically fix that problem of going quickly to digital. So I think I thought that was quite interesting. And my other areas of interest were slightly alarming. A couple of alarming bits of data. One of them was around where was it? Yeah. We design or make recommendations using evidence-informed principles to address the performance issue. So evidence, we're using kind of an evidence-informed decision, right? And 74% disagree with that. So they don't do that. Yep. So I think there's some way to go on using, an evidence-based or evidence-informed approach to learning. So I think that's worth flagging up. The other thing was evaluation of learning. Now, 24% have no systematic evaluation of learning. 36% evaluate satisfaction. Now, that is 60% who aren't really looking at impact properly.
Yep. It's depressing. They are depressing figures, Martin, I have to say. No evidence and no evaluation.
And 8% are looking at the impact on the organisation. 8%. Now, so there's obviously there's a long way to go. If we're saying that measuring the impact on the organisation is ultimately what L&D needs to be doing, then we've got an awfully long way to go on that. So I think this, satisfaction surveys, we know what do they tell us really, and do we understand the impact on the business of understanding some satisfaction around doing an e-learning course? I mean, we really do need to move beyond that, I think. But I think that's where people are. So this is a good, I started by saying it's kind of state of the nation. I think it's quite an interesting report just to be able to see where everyone's at. And so I think, as I said, some things are moving quite slowly and there are some red flags. But in other areas, there has been some quite significant movement. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Martin. I think the other point worth mentioning is that they're partnering with Accenture, and Andy Young, the managing director of Accenture Talent and Organisation, pops up through the report with some evidence based on their experience of working with organisations. That's actually quite a helpful and a happy inclusion. I think that's a good move, and I hope that partnership continues. I was glad to see that. So, Martin, it's 52 pages. It's very different from much shorter reports that we've been talking about recently. And it is a kind of state of the nation, however depressing that state might appear. And thank you for drawing it to our attention.
Thanks, Nigel.
I'm really pleased to be talking to Cheryl Walker this morning. Cheryl is someone who started in corporate learning, branched out on her own, and has become a real expert at facilitation, and now more so facilitation online. And she's just written a book, and it's a very nice book. It's called Leverage Live Online. And I've read it. I think it offers something really special for people who spend most of their time online, which is everybody. So Cheryl, welcome first of all, and then just tell us what makes your book different from hundreds of checklist books and using Zoom and getting the best out of Microsoft Teams, all of these kinds of books, articles, podcasts that have flooded the market over the last year. What makes your book special?
Thanks, Nigel. Thanks for having me. It's my book very much focuses on the human levers that we can use to engage people and to transform workplaces in live online. So it's not a game full of a book full of games and tricks and software cleverness. It's about the humanistic levers, which are language, empathy, and inclusivity, and how we employ those live online, because I think we do those naturally when we're in person, physically in a room with people. But when you put us in a webcam square, we can sometimes forget those very important human elements of relating to people. So that's what the book's all about.
Yeah, I think that's true, that when we're online, there's a level of anxiety which makes us focus on ourselves and getting things right and making sure that that person can speak and that your mic isn't muted and all those things. And we forget about that. I think that a very important word, empathy, that you've got a whole bunch of people who you've got to reassure, bring in, make them feel part of it all. And your book really explains that in spades. So tell us, what is the essence of the recommendations that you're making in the book around those three words? Because I think they're very important words too.
Yeah, if I start with language, I think a lot of what we've done in the live online environment, particularly in the times of the pandemic where we've had to go remote, or make up for the fact. A lot of that is around deficit thinking. We're focusing on the challenges that we can't be together physically rather than focusing on the opportunities. And that's only natural because a lot has been lost and a lot has been taken away from us. What I purposefully do is reframe the language. So instead of talking about doing things remote or virtually, which if you look at the definition of virtual, it's not real, and it's as if it's masquerading to be something. Now we're here, we're really here. So let's focus on words like connected and live online. We're live together, we're connected, and focusing on those words to talk about our events, our workshops, our meetings. And I am quite over the webinar word as well, because we've got a little bit of bias in the back of our heads about that. So language is really important in framing up what we're doing in this environment and in inviting people.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And that idea of live online is also live online. It's not about a kind of pale substitution, is it? It's the real thing. You are there with all those people, and it's your job to make that experience as good as it possibly can be. What about empathy? Let's go talk about empathy.
Yeah. So it was Jairi Engelstrom who first talked about social objects in the Web 2.0 era. And social objects are those things that kind of bring us together and galvanize us in a common understanding. So I've borrowed from that terminology and created empathy objects in the live online environment. So everything from how we open a session, what I call the arrival experiences, start to build empathy. The fact that we're here together as people, we're not focused on, buttons and webcams and muting and unmuting. That all just happens. We can deal with that. But things like acknowledgements. In Australia here, we have a very important acknowledgement to country that we often deliver at the start of important meetings and events. And it's in the spirit of reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples. That's one type of acknowledgement. There's other things that we potentially could and should acknowledge at the beginning of events and meetings, and that could be industry or organisational focused if there's change occurring, if there's transformation, upheaval, uncertainty, ambiguity in an industry or organisation, or it could be something broader in our society, social events, perhaps natural disasters, or human tragedies and so forth. Acknowledging those things acknowledges us as humans beings gathering, and it acknowledges the challenges that we're facing even as we gather with a specific purpose. So it's it's allowing empathy in, and it's
Yes.
role modeling
Yes.
that we bring everything.
And back again to live online, live online. It's acknowledging that we're part of the world. We're not in some bubble. Immediately we connect to Zoom. And
We're not on television.
No.
We're here.
Exactly. And the last one is empathy. Is diversity and inclusion. Well, explain that, because I completely agree. So many times, if you're in a biggish meeting, there is the periphery. There are the people on the fringes who can quietly slip away and no one really notices. And the whole action is focused on the just a small number in the center of the room. So how do you build inclusivity, and how do you build a diverse room?
Inclusivity is a delicate lever. It's a delicate balance between, just because we've got webinar software that we could invite hundreds and thousands of people, doesn't mean we necessarily should every time. So it's being careful about who's invited, who's included. And as Priya Parker puts in her book, sometimes you have to close the door to create the safe container. And where do you close that door? So who's included, who's invited, who is involved, and what are the roles in a meeting? It's also about then making sure we've got, the same as in a physical room, the right people in the right room at the right time to advance the purpose of what we're doing in the workshop. So I've seen a lot of mistakes made where, just because we can invite everybody to an online, we do, and that sometimes doesn't create the safe or the correct container for the purpose of what we're doing. So it's an interesting balance to try and
It is an interesting balance, and you're absolutely right. That point about in a room which has got room for 8 people, we invite 8 people. When you can invite 100, we tend to kind of leave that precision. Building meetings, building an environment. We leave that behind and just focus on, just let anyone in. And it does destroy the environment. And it means you have a kind of random conversation. You're very focused and you don't get things done. They're 3 really good and excellent foci, if you like, for the book. So I really hope it's a big success. Just tell me in a sentence, we're finished with this. Tell me in a sentence, Cheryl. I'm sitting here listening to this. Why should I buy this book? What am I going to get out of it? Can you sum that up in just a couple of words?
Yeah, it's about the opportunities. So now more than ever, we have the opportunity to lead the conversation for the workforce of the present and the future. And a lot of that is built around the necessity to be digital and be online. So now's the opportunity to do it well and to lead the conversation, particularly as HR or learning professionals, to take our organisation somewhere really positive with this.
Yeah, it's the whole organization. Cheryl, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. And this is an excellent book. I can highly recommend it. It's practical, but it's practical for all the right reasons. It's not about software. It's about human beings and how human beings can relate and be productive and have a great experience online. Cheryl, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you, Nigel. Lovely talking with you.
You would think we'd let Robin Hoyle have a month off, but no. Here are his reflections for the summer.
How's your learning culture? The reason that I ask is that you can't move without tripping over a reference to learning culture at the moment. We've got LinkedIn Learning announcing new resources, CIPD carrying out research showing a gap between people's ambitions and where they've actually got to in relation to learning culture. And now the people who are attending Learning Live next month have said their number one priority is to build a digital learning culture. Well, first of all, that's a bit of a surprise, because every time I've been involved with Learning Live and similar events like that, we've had the social learning aficionados telling us how easy it is to create digital learning and social learning using various technologies, because all we need to do is to replicate what people are doing anyway via YouTube and Twitter and now Instagram and goodness knows what else. And it turns out it's a little bit more difficult than that, and it requires us to create a digital learning culture, whatever that is. And I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it? If you were to ask 10 of those learning leaders at Learning Live next month what they mean by digital learning culture, I wouldn't be surprised at all if you didn't get 11 different answers. Because actually, learning culture is one of those kind of buzzword phrases which has come up over the past few years, but actually nobody quite defines what it means, and it can mean anything we want it to mean. It can mean what a vendor sells, or it can mean what somebody wants to present to the board in order to get a pay rise or an increased budget for their department. But nobody actually goes as far as to say, what does that mean? What does it look like? How will I know when I've got it? And that's one of those interesting challenges, because we've regularly referred to culture as being the way we do things around here, and presumably a learning culture is the way we learn things around here. But that seems to me to be insufficient to enable us to create some kind of plan of action for changing what it looks like. So actually we need a different definition. And the one that I use is the sum of dominant attitudes which affect behaviour and action. So if you think about that, that's the way people think, and very often the way people think, their beliefs, their values, what matters to them, what motivates them, may be very different from what the top team think is going on. Take coaching. I mean, coaching's got to be part of most people's learning culture, hasn't it? And I sit across from a number of chief people officers on a regular basis, and they tell me that coaching is absolutely woven into the warp and weft of daily activity within their teams. I then go and talk to those team leaders, and they say, coaching, what, me? When do you think I've got time to do that? I've got a day job to do. It's not my job to coach these people and to help them improve their performance. So instantly we've got a disconnect between what the top team think is happening and what's actually happening on the ground level. So it'd be very difficult for them to affect any meaningful change in culture if they don't quite know what the beliefs are of the people with whom they're working. So you've got to understand, take some time out to understand those attitudes and those beliefs. But I'm not that interested in what people think or believe. I'm interested in how that affects what they do, their actions and their behaviours. And that's where culture is really obvious. That's where we see it in what people do. And sometimes they can do great things and good things, and they can work in great and innovative ways. And other times they can do some pretty bad things. We talk about toxic cultures quite regularly, don't we? And what I think is that there are processes there which actually spread almost like a virus. And we all know how that works. Over the past year and a half, we've all become expert virologists. It's about creating opportunity for things to happen differently. It's about creating different available options and making them the obvious and natural choice. Now, there's one watch out with that, which is, although I don't think managers can impose culture but need to use a process of stealth to build it incrementally, behaviour and action and choice at a time, what I do think they can do is destroy any attempts to create a unified culture within an organisation by transgressing. We all know that when a manager does something which is out with the vision, the espoused vision of the organisation, then you've got some challenges, because everybody points to that and says, hang on a minute, how come it's okay for them to do that but not us? How do they get away with that, not us? So we have to think about managers being on board with the changes they're trying to take, but not trying to impose it on people, rather to create a process whereby, almost without it being obvious, things slowly change incrementally, one behaviour, one action at a time. It's a bit like Fight Club. You remember Fight Club? First rule of Fight Club? Nobody talks about Fight Club. Maybe the first rule of culture and changing culture should be Nobody talks about changing culture. Just get on and change those behaviours and see how they ripple backwards into how people think about the work they do and the choices that they make.
DPG's online courses are designed to fit around your life, so you can study anytime, anywhere. Get in touch now for more info.
So welcome back. I'm really excited to still be here with Stacey Lloyd from the Royal Voluntary Service. You may recall from last time that Stacey has amazingly managed to get 750,000 volunteers working for NHS England throughout the pandemic. And today we're really going to dig deep into, well, how on earth does anybody, any learning and development manager, actually focus on 750,000 people? And in fact, there were more than that, Stacey. We didn't even talk about it last time, that you had another 150 on a call centre as well. So welcome back, Stacey.
Thank you.
We're going to really focus in on what is it that you can do with 750,000 people at pace, at the depth and the safety levels that they needed, because safeguarding was a huge thing for you. Problem solving, another huge thing. How are we going to help people? Added into that the dating app that you had, marrying your volunteers with the volunteer need, and the call centre. So let's start with the call centre. You had 150 people there. What did you do there? Was that a little bit more traditional, or was that quite exciting too?
It was a little bit more traditional, I think. And when we sort of commissioned the call centre for us to work with, the call centre called Ventrica, again, really quickly, it was all in the same period of, trying to work out what the volunteers needed, trying to work out what the call centre needed versus trying to work out how we could support our referrers to use the programme as well. So with the call centre, though, we needed to be realistic again. So we sort of adopted a bit of a trainer approach. So created an induction program for them, introduced how the actual program works. They needed to know the ins and outs of how the app worked to be able to support people. So we started off with sort of creating a lot of material, presenting and delivering that in that sort of cascade train the trainer type method to the team leaders within the call centre. And that, over a couple of days, then they were then confident enough to pass that on to their teams within the call centre. So it was getting them up and running in the first place, but then we were able to, just provide sort of updates, regular communication with any changes to how the programme was operating. And they, from the beginning, adopted that approach as in, let's tell our team leaders, we'll then cascade that through our teams for you. So.
And I know many people listening to this interview will really hear that that's how it works, especially with large numbers of people, that you train some people and then they pass that on. That's, as I say, a very traditional approach. You mentioned there the word referrers. Who are the referrers?
So the referrers are kind of the other match to the volunteers, really. So where you've got the volunteers going out and about and doing what they need to do, the referrers are a group of people, and they could be other charities, NHS practitioners, and there's loads of sort of people within that group, but they're the people needing help. So they're referring in their patients that need their shopping done, and they use the app from one side to say, I need some help. Then the volunteers are like, I'm available, where can I help? And that match happens. So the referrers, again, needed to understand the system, needed to understand how to use the app, how to raise referrals, how to change them, amend them, etc. So they needed to understand their part of the app as well. And again, we sort of took a slightly different approach with that. So developing things like videos, a video on how to raise a referral, how the app works, how to even register as a referrer as well. So we tended to use digital more to be able to provide them with the information they needed to be able to raise those referrals.
So that was much more a point of need resource for them to pick up and run with. Okay, so you've gone from your Zoom calls with your call centre people, a bit more traditional, and then you've gone into your digital video how-to guides, and you were producing those in-house, were you?
Yes, in-house. So between myself and my learning development partners, we were frantically, using software to create videos, just so we could post them on places like YouTube and send the links directly then to the referrers, so they're able to sort of watch them.
Okay, well, no disrespect. I'm sure that they were wonderful, but they weren't professionally produced. They were just kind of homemade, and people were happy with that. People, they just wanted to know how to do it.
Mm-hmm. And I think with, the situation we were in, the speed we needed to get these things done, don't get me wrong, we released one version and then we're like, that could be better, pull it back, amend it, adapt it, make it better, release it again. So we were updating those videos on a regular basis, but, the end product did the job. It absolutely worked. It wasn't flashy and perfect, but it absolutely gave the messages that they needed to be able to raise the referrals.
This is one of the reasons I love your story, because this is exactly where I think learning needs to be at. People want the stuff. They don't necessarily want it to be polished and shiny and beautiful. They just want to know the how-to. And the fact that you were iterating those and making them better as your skills improved, as you had more time, I should imagine, as well, that you could redo those as well, which is really wonderful. So let's focus then people may recall from last time, you've got 4 core roles, and then 4 core roles plus roles where they've got extra responsibilities. So if you like, sort of 6 different types of activities going on with 6 different types of roles. What was it that you did for those people? How did you get all of that knowledge into 750 people, 750,000, sorry, 750,000 people's heads?
So we started off, the very first thing we did was create Getting You Started guides or Getting You Started packs for each of those volunteering roles. So the first 4 that we went live with had individual packs, which told them what they needed to know in regards to their roles. But I was really, really conscious that was just information. It was just, it wasn't checking their understanding. Yes, we had all these support departments they could go to. We had an in-house safeguarding team, a problem-solving team, the call centre, all these points of contact for them to sort of sense check. But I was just really conscious that was just information. So again, as I got a bit more time and as things evolved, we started looking at how could we engage more with the volunteers and understand what they wanted. We had a really big social media presence as well. So luckily, we could go out and ask questions to volunteers to say, what else do you need? What parts of the role are you struggling with? And they could come back through those platforms then and let us know exactly what they needed. That then led to us developing webinars. So which we're still running today now, sort of a year on, which are webinars on set topics, really. And again, we've changed them from feedback. So things like mental health awareness, dementia awareness, an introduction to the app, or, an introduction to the program. So they're constantly changing, those webinars are, but it gives volunteers an opportunity to come speak to somebody in the program. And there's always sort of a question and answer session at the end of that as well. So we found people sharing their stories amongst each other. So one person would talk about a scenario where they were speaking to someone who perhaps was sort of struggling with their mental health. And then somebody else would say, well, I had someone like that, and this is how I dealt with it, and this is what I did. And they're just learning from each other. It's a real social learning. And then they just sort of, it's building their confidence. They're going on, not feeling uncomfortable with making those phone calls. So it's just a really natural way of sharing experiences and learning from each other, really.
Perfect. So much in there, feedback loops, information, then you're heading into, feedback through social media and then getting better. And you're also then heading into that social learning peer support. Now, some of the people who are listening to this on Learning Now TV, seeing us, will know that I recently published this book, which is honestly, your story is like this book in a nutshell, which makes me so excited. And why is it? Well, because a couple of the frameworks I included in the book, one is information, communication and education, the ICE framework. And it's a lens through which we look at things. And what you've just talked about there is exactly that. You knew very quickly you needed to just give information. How do you do that? Well, communication was key there. You just gave them guides. You gave them access to the call center. You gave them access to the app. You just gave them the information. But as time went on, you needed to educate around that information. Hence, the webinars, hence the peer support stuff. Another framework that I've included in the book is the 3 R's framework. What is required? And in this case, your information was required. They just need to know what it is they're doing. What's the role? We've got real clear purpose. Let's go. But then, of course, what resources are around that? So how can I use the app? Then in come the webinars. You also talked about videos earlier as resources. And then the 3rd R is the referred. What's coming in from the community? What's coming in from the learners themselves? And in this case, this is where your peer support came in. So a shame we weren't having this conversation prior to me writing my book, but it's wonderful to hear that, Stacey, it's out there, people. It really is a way. And I'm so pleased that you've been able to share your story with us today. And I'm also so pleased that you as a charity have been able to help so many people throughout this pandemic. So thank you so much for all of your hard work. And thanks very much for coming on Learning Now TV today.
No
Thanks,
worries.
Stacey.
Thank you, Michelle.
I love doing book launches, and I'm really pleased to have both authors of a brand new book. It was launched at the end of June, and it's available now. And we'll put a link on the end of on the screen at the end of the interview to tell you where you can get hold of it. And what it's called is The Empowered Job Search. And what's fascinating is it's a book that starts before you look for a job and it continues after you've got your job. So it's a really detailed profile of all of the stages of pre-job to actually settling into your new job. Now, the first question, Kathy, I'd like to ask. Kathy Wasserman, you're one of the key authors in the book. Why do you think the world needs another book on job search when LinkedIn gives you 20,000 hints and tips and throws jobs at you on a weekly basis? What is special about your book?
The book really gets at the depth and multidimensionality of the human experience in the job search and the workplace, and what gets in the way of people going for what they really want and how they can really share the fullness of who they are. And in my experience as a coach for the last couple of decades, I've seen that a lot of what gets in the way is individuals not being able to work with their feelings and the blocks and worries and frustrations and lack of clarity that comes up when you're either in a job that you don't like or you want something more. And so the book really addresses how to work with yourself, how to tap into your feelings, to look at and identify your deeper needs and what that means about what you really want to do and what you really want to share about yourself with the world and to better the world.
Yeah, and Lauren, there's facts and figures saying that up to 40% of the US workforce are currently looking for jobs. So you've kind of picked the sweet spot to launch this book. Why would, if I'm anxious to get a job, part of what I want to do is not be open and be honest, but to be slightly concealing and put a nice mask on that makes me look fantastic. Why should I do what Kathy's suggesting and be more open and clear and less willing to fabricate an image that I think will impress my potential employer? Because that's what people do.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's really scary, I think, to do that. I think just acknowledging that when you're putting yourself out there, and showing who you really are, it's a little nerve-wracking. And I just want to say we acknowledge that in the book. And I think people think they have to be someone that they're not when they're going through their job search. And that just shows. And I think that hiring managers can kind of tell when you're not bringing that authenticity. And so I think that if individuals, as they're looking for a job, can really show who they are in the best way possible, and embracing and sharing more of who they are, that actually helps build connection, builds relationship, and makes them a stronger candidate.
Yeah, and it also is much more likely that if it's the real self getting the job, they're hiring the real person, and the real person will like the job. That if it's all a bit phony, then it all comes heavily unstuck at any stage in the process. So I think that's right. Well, Kathy, just that one of the interesting features of the book, which you don't see in any other job search book that I've ever seen, is that you talk about mindsets, and you say appropriately that the kind of mindset that will help you look for a job is not the one that where you apply for a job, certainly where you negotiate for a job, and then yet again when you begin the job. So just talk a little bit about why you framed it. There are 10 chapters, 10 stages, 10 mindsets. How did you come to that, and where did you get that model from?
A lot of it came from both my and Lauren's work with individuals in real life and seeing what gets in the way and approaching the job, as Lauren said, as you're selling yourself. You're trying to convince an employer of your value, and you're not really grounded in yourself. Mindset is all about grounding in the present moment, grounding in yourself, grounding in what you can control and influence, accepting what you cannot, and really bringing the full fruit of what you have to offer. We live in a world actually of sort of masks and virtual reality. And I think that being in an authentic mindset is more important than ever as we seek to really rebuild our world. We're in a moment in the sort of COVID, post-COVID moment where we're needing to rebuild not just the world, but also the workplace. And without being in touch with yourself, what you need, what you feel, what your goals are, where you are you in touch with your body? We're all sort of talking heads as we sit here as talking heads.
As talking heads, yes.
Right. It's really important in order to create together.
Yeah, so it's about being authentic and getting yourself in the right frame of mind for each stage of the job search process, so that you're not brutalized or behave over arrogantly or aggressively or whatever else. Lauren, pick a couple of the mindsets and talk us through those, because I think that's a very interesting approach. And no one else really, they talk about applying for a job as a process. You fill in this form, you do this, you take care not to do this or use these words. But what you're saying is it's not about that at all. It's about getting yourself ready to be engaged in, not a battle, but engage in an adventure which has a number of different stages, and you go through a number of different gates. And if you're prepared, you do it better. Just like if you go up a mountain without any protection, you end up getting frostbite and you end up in trouble. So talk us through a couple of the mindsets. Which ones appeal to you?
Certainly we start with getting in a present mindset, which is the foundation for everything, be able to connect to yourself and, connect to others. But I would say for me, like getting disciplined. The job search is a process. It takes time. It takes at least 3 to 6 months. If you're lucky, sometimes upwards of a year. And I would just say, as we wrote the book, I went through 2 job searches and transitions myself. And being disciplined and focused was so important, because it's easy to get pulled by everything else that you have going on. And I think it's a good reminder of how do you get focus. And we talk about, a morning practice and an evening practice, and creating some ritual in your life that can help you get more connected to your feelings or needs, or, to have some movement in the morning, or a gratitude practice, which we know helps, goodwill and your own, building your own resilience and sense of self. And so just getting connected to a morning practice and evening practice, and noticing where you are and what you need in the moment is also part of that process.
Yeah. If you just look at the contents and the 10 stages, that is a readjustment for people who think it's all about emailing your curriculum vitae, emailing your resume, and then waiting for the offers to come back. It's not that at all. It's about a much, much deeper process of preparation and engagement. How would you sell it, Lauren? What would you say to me if I'm saying, oh, it looks quite good, Lauren, but I'm not sure I want to spend all that money on getting something like this? How would you sell it to me?
Well, it's cheaper than hiring a coach, although that's not to say that there's value in obviously having a guide and somebody to hold your hand and help walk you through and coach you and reflect, what you're sharing. But, I want to also respond to an earlier question, because we didn't set out to write a book, and there is so much noise out there. But I think, again, there's so much noise with lots of the same advice. And I think, it almost dilutes the message of how important I think our book is, because it is about you, and it's about what you are creating in this world. And as Kathy said, it's really practical. We tried to make it not about, we included some stories, but it's not about all of other people's journeys. It's about your journey. And so giving yourself the space and time to work through the process with the exercises that we share. It's really practical. It even has a resume and cover letter that we've annotated, so you can kind of look and have an example. And it's the whole journey. A lot of the sites and LinkedIn articles and the Muse and other sites have kind of little segments and pieces that you have to weave together. But I think for a lot of people, our book is a place where you can go through the whole journey. And at the same time, you're not just building your skills for now for the job search, but it's a continuum.
So thank you for writing the book. I think it's very, very useful, and it is unique. There may be lots of books about job search. There's nothing like this, and it is a learning journey that will benefit everyone, and it is almost like having your coach sitting by your side and taking you through every stage. And it is a lot cheaper than having to get a coach, even though if you had a coach like Kathy, that would be good value for money as well. So thank you, both of you. Thank you so much for talking to me. And we've got a crawl on the screen. You can see the book cover and you can see where you can buy it. And I hope lots of people do. So the very best, and good luck with the launch, and good luck with the progress with the book. Thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank
you so much.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite, you just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question, you might want to answer this later.
You see, I love this.
So, Kate, what about the program? What did you enjoy most?
Well, as I said at the beginning, I think the new book around the job search is just unbelievably timely. And I think it goes back to kind of some of the things we've discussed before as well around mindset from, yes, the job seekers point of view, but also from an organizational point of view. Where is the overlap in terms of broader HR, talent acquisition and recruiting, and learning and development. And you think about that pre-boarding, that onboarding process, and that whole kind of big picture around the employer value proposition. All of that starts right from the very first moment that someone's searching a job. And so I'm really excited to read that because, as I say, I think it could not be more topical at the moment.
It's also the first book that I've read on job search. It isn't just a series of checklists which are magically padded out to become a book. This is really looking deeply at how you get yourself in the right frame to go through the various stages and to recognize that there are 6 clear stages from thinking about getting a new job to actually turning up on day one. I found it very, very helpful, and it's beautifully written as well. The two authors absolutely know what they're talking about. So it's great stuff. Right, so let me just talk a little bit. We've talked about the program. Let's talk about what might be on coming over the next few months. And the first thing is Learning Live on the 8th and 9th of September. That's in London, the OPI's conference, followed by, closely, 5th and 6th of October, World of Learning, back in Birmingham. Won't it be great to get back to the NEC again? And then the 7th to 10th of November, Learning 2021, returning to Orlando from the E-Learning Guild, or the Learning Guild as it's called now. And then finally, 1st to 3rd of December, we've got Online Educa in Berlin. So that's conferences in September, October, November, and December to see out the rest of the year. I think things are slightly moving back to where they were before. What do you think, Kate?
Yeah, fingers firmly crossed. It does feel good to have a busy event schedule. It's going to be super fascinating. Obviously, at Unleash, we're already planning for next year and talking about how do we make these events hybrid for those who can't or won't travel. That's both speakers, obviously, and attendees. And as I guess as a content person, I'm genuinely excited about the opportunities that offers. So yeah, bring back the event season. I can't wait.
Bring back the event season and be sensitive to the opportunities that hybrid offers. I completely agree with you. Well, we'll be back on the 30th of September for an exciting Learning Now TV program, and we hope to see you all there.